Okay, welcome everybody. Thank you for being here today. It's Pioneer Day in Idaho and Utah, Arizona. It's a state holiday in Utah. It's a cultural holiday for us here. Thanks for taking this time on a beautiful Sunday to come out and listen to a book. Thanks for supporting Foster Literary, our endeavor, the endeavor that Georgia and I have started to make our own books and get books out into the world. It's a new independent creative co-op. We're excited that this is our first book and our first big event as well. There are many more to come. In fact, I thought I'd start today talking about a little bit of how Foster Lit has progressed in 2 weeks. We have sold over 60 copies of our books. That's a surprise to us. We were excited with the first 3, but now we have 60 books out in the world. They're available on our website, fosterlit.com, where you can get a special edition hardcover with a dust jacket copy of both of our books with a signature. You can also go to Amazon to get the quick Kindle edition or the paperback. What I'm going to be reading from is a proof. I still don't have my paperback yet, but people are getting them in 2 days, and they look really good from what I'm seeing out there coming back. It's a nice glossy book full of words, so y'all should enjoy it if that's your thing, right? The other good news, it's really fun DIYing this on your own end. You get to see all of your hard work pay off. So in week 1, this book, The Crown Package, was ranked 888 in paperbacks for the essay category. Now in week 2, we're at 488. That's good progress, right? So if you do decide to buy the non-special edition, I would encourage you to go get the paperback, because maybe, we'll hit that 300 mark one day. It'd be exciting.
But you're #1 in Rigby Times bestseller.
That is. In the imaginary bookstore newspaper Rigby Times, I am #1 for sure. And I'm the only writer here selling books today, so there you go. For all of you tuning in, you probably follow us or know about us through the programs. Of course, we'd invite anyone to follow us on Instagram, foster.literary. We also have a newsletter that we'll be sending out. You can sign up for that on our website as well. And Georgia and I post a lot of our writing news on our personal accounts. We're on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter. We're really truly growing this company straight out of the dirt, like we were taught how to do in Idaho. We plant a seed, we water it, we work on it, we make it grow. So again, thank you. This is just an endeavor like all of them that starts with a lot of faith and a big jump out into oblivion to see how this goes. The bad news of today is I thought that we would have 50 copies here available that I could sign and sell, but they're stuck in the mail, supply chain, yada yada. So if you would like that particular book, they will arrive next week. $25 for an inscription, and I'll make sure that it gets to you wherever you are. Georgia will have some details on how we work that out. Georgia has a QR code and a link, so message her if you would like that book or the QR code. And I just want to say personal thanks to Georgia, my lovely life partner and wife out in the back at the tech station, who has spent her entire day off setting up my own private circus, and I just really appreciate you and love you. Thanks, Georgia. Best editor and partner. We love what we're doing here. So with that said though, I woke up this morning and thought, why am I doing this? And I think I rolled over and said to Georgia, I have a bad feeling about today. I think this is going to be a flop. That was the exact words. And so fitting that today we're here on Pioneer Day, which I'll explain a little bit for you viewers who aren't from the Intermountain West and celebrating Pioneer Day. But I thought, what must it feel like to wake up on day 90 and wake up and roll over and see your wagon wheel out in Wyoming somewhere and think, why did I decide to do this? Like, why did I commit to this life? And I figured that might be the entry point in today's reading. Is I wanted to talk about pioneers and pioneering and the pioneer heritage that I carried forward in this book. To give you a little background, our Pioneer Days holiday starts July 24, 1847, when Brigham Young and the first flight of Latter-day Saints enters the Salt Lake Valley. Now, you would think that would be a momentous and joyous occasion, but Brigham Young was 46 years old, nearly dead from mountain fever, laid down in one of the wagons, and Wilford Woodruff, did I get that right? I get Woodrow Wilson and Wilford Woodruff mixed up sometimes in my brain. Wilford Woodruff, the Mormon leader, was also sick with mountain fever in the cabin too. So you can imagine that all these goals, dreams, and aspirations of the pioneers who had joined the church, come across the ocean, met up in the Midwest, and started to travel west. You would think that day of arrival would be glorious, and it was not. It was hard, and it was surprisingly hard. That was Brigham's famous line, "This is the place." He knew that he had arrived with the saints, and the first thing they did, again, as you could imagine, you think that would be a momentous and celebratory moment. They woke up and they had to plant potatoes, plant turnips, build a dam, dig in houses, and get ready for winter. They had arrived too late, July 24th. So the first Pioneer Day celebration doesn't even happen until 1849, 2 years later, when 4,000 to 5,000 people have established out in the Salt Lake Valley, and there's enough pride that each little ward, each little neighborhood gathers around and does a parade around their little block in solidarity for what they had done in establishing out in the wilderness. Now, if you're Mormon and you've grown up in the Intermountain West, ideals of perseverance and endurance and innovation are all part of our story. And that's what I've tried to embody as a writer coming from this place, is taking some of our stories and our attributes and imbuing them in the art that I'm trying to produce. So, Pioneer Day here for us is coming together, family and friends, on a very quiet day in the middle of the summer where the first crop of hay has been put up, the cows are up in the mountains getting fed, eating the grass, the potatoes are growing, the corn is growing, the grain is about ready to come due for harvest. This is a particularly a holiday of the Intermountain West where men, women, and children would come together, share what they had. They would look back on their hard work of the spring. They would anticipate their hard work of the fall. It's this perfect mid-year respite where we can reconsider why we do what we do. It's very Idahoan, I think, Pioneer Day. So, see if I can gather my thoughts here really quickly. When it comes to my own book, let me take 10 minutes and talk to you then about how a boy from a farm here in Rigby, Idaho, after 40 years can come up with a book of their own stories. I will say this, when I was a little boy, just 4 miles from here, we lived in a house where I lived in the basement, and out the back door was always a beautiful field that I could look out on. And we had a little barn, and I would climb up on top of the barn, and I would look out over this field, and I would think, how can I ever explain this beauty to somebody that's not from here? I just didn't know how, but I felt this artistic urge and anticipation that I needed to share this art with the world. In my mind back then, 11 or 12, I thought that might mean making a music video for MTV on top of the roof of our farm. And it's an interesting thing to be born in an agrarian world in the late 20th century. I was coming of age in the 1990s, where the world was starting to connect in new ways as well. Our pioneer heritage of the past 175 years was very closed by the mountain ranges and by the traffic coming through our valleys. It was very limited. And in the 90s, all of a sudden, we were all connected in a new way with the rest of the world. I could be a farm kid watching MTV in Rigby, Idaho. That was new technology. And I think that also informed my writing, is how do I be this millennial, but also be a writer that values the heritage of place. We have a lot of good examples coming from this new environment. You know, Idaho, it became a state in 1892. We're a fairly new place still in cultivation and on. Has sped us up, but we're still not old in any sense. There were two, I think, very important influences, homegrown for me, Vardis Fisher and Philo T. Farnsworth. I'll talk a little more about their influence on me as well. But, okay, here's the book. In part, the cover is influenced by Philo T. Farnsworth, who was obsessed with lines. He would look out on the farm fields here in Idaho, and these lines would tell him stories. They'd draw shapes in the hillsides, and the light, the way the shadows revealed everything. This is how he came up with his initial ideas for aligning electrons in a line that could then broadcast a picture across the airwaves. So I wanted to try to capture the thing that inspired a scientist with this cover. Spencer, my cousin, sitting front center right here, took that design with me and really embodied something that I think is Idaho, okay? It's big mountain, the colors are the places, or the colors are the colors that we see here as we come through the spring, summer, and fall. In that same sense, Vardis Fisher, who grew up on the Antelope Bench, where my family farms still to this day, a lot of his stories were about the hardship of breaking out this earth into something that's cultivatable or something that is harnessable. He also wrote deeply about relationships with animals, something that here out in Idaho, we have a different relationship to animals than I think most places. So all of that to say, I need to explain a few more things about the book. But all of that to say, I think what's found in this book are strange stories to most people. Strange stories where they might answer, does life really still exist like this? To which I would answer, of course. But no one's been able to tell you it, or you haven't been listening yet. Now we're in a moment where that can all break open and all these stories can be shared. Both Vardis Fisher and Philo Farnsworth had a really hard time leaving the Intermountain West and entering the professional world. And their stories kind of play out in disastrous forms as they get out of the valley, get out of the Intermountain West, and try to make a name for themselves as well. One of those ways is, it's interesting to be alone in your head and then try to translate that out into the world. This book is full of fiction and nonfiction in that same vein. Out here in this world, there weren't many writers to tell me how to be a writer or to teach me how to be a writer. So what I did is I tried to write about everything that I possibly could in all sorts of different formats, so that I could learn how to be the best writer I could. This took me to lots of different places. I'll tell you a little bit more about that. I thought I'd start, though, by reading the shortest essay in the book, which is called The Crown Package, which is where the title of the book comes from. Once I decided that I was going to depart from the mainstream to traditional publishing track, which I had been part of for 15 years, when I decided to make my own book, one controlling choice that I had to make again and again was, does this reflect me as an artist? Now, as you can imagine, the backs of most books are full of blurbs and good commentary and a hook that sell your book in the bookstore. But I knew I didn't have to do any of that. So what I did was I tried to make an essay that captures all of the pieces in the book, but can also tantalize a reader who does not know me to buy the book. So this essay is made up of one line from each of the 27 pieces in the book. The Crown Package. Oh, I'd made some mistakes. What number was this? I said a prayer in my heart and belted up and got us out on the winter roads. I wanted to make nothing easy, no dead giveaways. These details I have never forgotten. Should I go on with my sob story, my broken parts? I am not a person who likes to disappoint. If I die, I might resurrect. I figure, I hope, I doubt. I am not the Savior. I am his cousin. I could hardly talk from loss of breath. I'd done a good thing, proud of my animal husbandry. I am not a writer because I am well pleased with your service to this company. I am here to recall, to investigate, to report, to experience this midway purgatory. I ain't spending my life feeling like I own them all. I make friends with a policeman. I have blood. I'm just doing as I'm told. I shot a cat, about the scariest shot I ever shot. I thought about pulling rank. I opened my mouth. I achieved levitation. That's a fault of mine, taking things too far. I'm a bit over the top. I fall to my knees. I box up my work clothes and bury them in the closet and quit, this time for good. So the book is organized in reverse chronological order. The first thing you'll encounter in my book is a duet essay that I wrote with Georgia Pearle in 2020 for an online essay music contest called March Xmas. Okay? And then we work backwards from there all the way back to 2005 to my mother's still favorite piece, Second Day of Sun, which was my first paid publication. I was still a senior in college, right? It was 2005, I was graduating spring 2006. And I sold that essay, Second Day of Sun, to Idaho magazine for $18. This catapulted me into literary fame, as you can imagine, and I've enjoyed the privilege of being a writer ever since. Right? So that's the book, is you start with my voice, hopefully in its newest, best form, because writing, like every other art, is layered. You get better and better the more you do it, the longer you do it. Again, this is the Mormon principle of perseverance and endurance. Once you decide to do something, you do the thing until you arrive at a place. Okay? I'm going to go into reading some of the shorter pieces. Now, the other thing I wanted to explain here is, as a reader, you're going to encounter nonfiction, which are essays from my life. that maybe paint a portrait of who I am that might make you feel a certain way. But they operate differently than the fiction that is in this book, which maybe looks and feels more like a TV show kind of drama narrative that pushes action into consequence and then finally into some dramatic reveal. I liked, again, once I left and I decided that I was a writer by trade, the goal for me was to write as many different ways as possible to learn as much as I could. And as you can imagine, I started with my inherited stories, the stories of Idaho that kind of made me who I am. And I used the materials around me to make my stories and the materials that are from my life. So you'll find that the content, you can imagine, lines up with who I am. I'm going to start by reading a short essay. Okay, so this is nonfiction and it's called Hunters. It was published in 2010 by an online magazine called Shady Side Review. Drink some water real quick too. And we're on brand. Georgia made us some cups. Thank you, Georgia. Okay, this is a short piece. My father taught me, this one's called Hunters. Hunters. My father taught me to shoot a gun in the city park across from my grandmother's house in Rigby during the few months we lived there. I was 10 that spring, the only time I lived in town before college. We'd take the BB gun from his pickup, cross the street to the city park, and take aim at the aluminum garbage cans chained to the picnic tables. The gratifying shuck of the lever action that chambered the next shot only rivaled the plunk of copper BB on aluminum lid. When I tired, my father would take the gun and swing cock it, hold it out one-handed, and tag the cans. Once, a police cruiser drove past and slowed. My father shadowed the gun along his leg and waved. The cop returned the salutation and kept driving. Pops slapped me on the back, somehow telling me that was how things were supposed to be done. Irrigation canals crisscrossed the land around our house like intricate stitching. The cover brought Canada geese and sandhill cranes, but more than anything, ducks. We shot the quackers like we swatted flies, daily and without remorse. We cleaned them near the well pit. One of my father's favorite gags was to cut off a leg and pull back the orange skin and find the tendons. He'd coax one of us youngsters near to examine the foot, otherworldly with its scaly webs and bumpy nails, and then Dad would pull the tendons, flexing and constricting the duck's toes. The first few times we shrieked and shied away, but once the shock wore off, we took turns pulling on that flossy string that ran parallel to the bone. Once, I took a duck foot to show and tell. I can't recall the class's reaction, but remember it made my backpack smell like wet and living leather. My father is a hunter. If he itches for ducks and geese, he walks to the canals behind his house. If he's antsy for deer and elk, he drives 20 miles to his ranch and stakes out runs and paths. I cannot remember a year he hasn't shot a big game animal. Before I could carry a rifle, I'd push brush for my father on the annual elk hunt. The hunt ushered in transition, marking the end of the farming season. We met at the farm shop, sometimes in snow, sometimes rain, usually a stout wind. In the black anticipation of the eerie sunless morning, all of us milled about as serious as wolves. My father divvied out assignments to the group, one pickup here, another there, fan out along the hills, plant near the cliffs. Then we left, a cavalcade of headlights humming toward the crags. I carried a pellet gun. My father dropped me in the thick draws and then took station farther up the mountain. I crept through the forest barrel first, my hands sweating through my gloves. Morning came, and the sun shot down in kaleidoscope spirals through the tall conifers. At that point of complete vanishment and panic, me not knowing north from south, or where the big guns were, or if the hunters would mistake me for game, it was then that echoes of gunshots sounded. Fool hens boomed out from the grass and scared me so bad I thought I'd been shot. Here's a story for you, Pops. I shot a cat near the granary at the old house. I heard you complaining about how many strays were around, so I took my Pump 22, the one you gave me for my 12th birthday, the only gun I'll ever love, and waited in the driveway until a cat came wandering. It hunched down in the gravel about 20 feet out. I put a bead right on the thick of its chest and paused. I watched that mangy orange tom breathing on the other side of the barrel, and something stirred in me. I could not do it. I put down the rifle. But then I didn't want you to be bothered by this cat, so I brought the gun up and shot behind it in warning. The lead ricocheted, drilled the cat in the hip. The red painted its hind legs. Mewling and caterwauling like I'd never heard, the cat came to me wanting help, crying as it dragged itself through the gravel. I rose up to put it out of its misery. Now it was on the driveway pavement, but again I balked. I ran for the garage. The cat followed and crawled under the Suburban and pulled itself into the undercarriage and knelled. I shut and locked the back door. The cat must have died up there, fallen out somewhere on the road. I never found its body. You probably didn't see the blood on the driveway. I washed it off with the hose. One epic year elk hunting at the ranch, we harvested 4 bulls and 4 cows in one morning. My cousins and I added 3 fool hens. We dragged the animals back to the house and laid them out for a photo, their chest cavities propped open with branches of pine, their blood-running rivulets down the hill toward the dirt road. I stood in the photo with my bird and pellet gun, my orange safety hat, my bloody jeans, one among a dozen other identical men. So you can see that in my early writing, I'm informed by this place particularly. It's humans and it's animals. I'm in it as well, participating, not without conflict, right? And I think as far as nonfiction and the essays go, conflict and internal turmoil is part of a narrative there. How we are, who we are in these moments that are thrust upon us, right? Different from that, let me show you a different take on similar material. Now I'm going to move to a story called Clean Up 1997, which I write 5 years later than Hunters. And this is a short story. This is fiction. So it's going to run and feel a little differently than that essay. The other thing I should warn you about this book is that 26 of the 27 pieces all are narrated by an I, right? A first-person narration. I need to suggest to you, or at least plant in your mind, that all of these I's are not me. and all of these family members are not my family. As a writer, you can do whatever you want to do with your material. It was important to me to keep it in the frame of my experience as a man out here in the dirt in Idaho. But I took liberties in taking my family stories or my family characters and turning them into something new. In this story, Cleanup 1997, I even add a sister to the mix, and I move us out to the Osgood area, where in a completely different reality, I'm growing up with a different name. But this is how I practiced becoming the writer that I wanted to become. So here's another farm story, another cat story too. Cleanup 1997, and I want to say thank you to Menagerie Magazine and Steve Woodward for taking this story and running it as a special edition to lead out with this book. Cleanup 1997. What I remember about 97 was that people dumped a lot of crap on our farm that year. Dad blamed this on the weak winter and the awful holdover 96 crop. Too much of everything, and nobody in eastern Idaho moneyed up enough to care for excess. So the extemporaneous got ditched. Osgood got Osbad real fast. An inordinate amount of garbage littered the borrow pits. Mattresses, refrigerators, stoves, sinks, toilets, black trash bags full of the unknown. But when Dad found a toothless horse hitched to the gate of the steel farm, I sensed that this year would be worse than ever. Along with his elk rifle, Dad took the horse out to the cinder pit and put to rest that bag of bones. This act left him ornery for most of January, and I thought I understood. The next animal abandoned at the farm was a big black lab dog. Dad spotted the blip 400 yards out in the stubble field behind the farmyard, what we called the area behind where sat my family's house, the farm repair shop, the workers' cinder block bunkhouse, and 2 earthen A-frame potato cellars. Dad looked through the gun scope and declared it was no coyote. I stood with him on the back porch and squinted, trying to make out the dog. Dad shot and, I guessed, missed. The lab ran free and 2 nights later left its ghostly scat as provocation on the front lawn. Dad stepped in it the next morning, erupted, "I guess I'm expected to clean up everyone's messes, solve everyone's problems." "What's next?" I parroted alongside him. "A snapping turtle? An ostrich?" Dad didn't laugh, blew air through his nostrils and grumbled, scanning the field and beyond. I never did see that mud again and knew why. At the end of March, 8 arrived from Mexico: Pancho, Memo, Armando, Victor, and 4 new guys whose names I still needed to learn. They added to the yard's already large population. We had the brothers D, Dan, Daryl, and Dick, employed year-round to mechanic and truck crop to market, always in the backyard. Together they carpooled the 14 miles from Rigby, but joked about pulling out a camper and living in the shop. There was my mother taking care of the banking and the bills, and my 6 sisters, aged 13, 11, 9, 7, 5, and 3. There was Dad, and there was me, Johnny Sturl, 15 years old. I had applied for and received a farmer's driving permit. Otherwise, I would have had to wait until 16 like all the rest. The laminated card was a formality, as I'd been driving the 3-speed 65 Ford pickup out on the washboard desert farm roads since I was 12. In fact, I was driving the Ford back from an FFA meeting one muddy March day making the sharp curve around Cinder Butte, scanning for new garbage, as Dad had given me the job to keep the road clean, when I spotted a cardboard box up ahead. It sat in the road dead center and was too big for me to safely straddle or hit. I pulled to the shoulder and planned to take it to the shop dumpster. When I bent to pick it up, whines emanated from inside. The box was duct taped shut, so I fished out my bone-handled Glory West pocket knife and sliced through the tape. The ratty box contained a litter of 5 beautiful black and white kittens, their eyes wide and terrified, their bodies huddled and pressed into a one-corner mass. Not newborns, they were alert and hissed at me. I'd never been around kittens. I picked up the box and carefully slid it across the Ford's bench and drove home with caution. I let them out in the garage and prepared a saucer of milk. They didn't take to that. They wanted meat. I opened a can of tuna fish and they feasted. After, they flexed and scampered, roly-polied all over each other, happy, satisfied creatures, until they tired. I sat and played with them between my feet. They returned to the overturned box and fell asleep in a pile at the foot of the garage deep freeze. When Dad came in that night, he was not pleased. He'd seen them in the box. Cats serve no purpose, climbing all over everything, clawing everything. They sleep wherever they fall over. They don't mind anyone. Even if they mouse, they torture them and kill them and bring guts to the back door. Cats are cruel, vain beasts. Get them away from my pickup. You shouldn't have swerved. Dad, I said, these are pretty sweet looking. You'd like these. Son, I don't like cats. I don't want cats. And cute kittens become cats. Geez, Dad, they're babies. Should I drown them in the canal? My father said, Johnny, don't be so dramatic. Get them gone, now. He had that stern look, embers smoldering far behind his pupils. Dad was not an intentionally cruel man. If he expected me to kill them, he would have said so. He probably sensed that he'd have to do that anyways, as I didn't enjoy hunting or fishing or in general causing pain. I interpreted his command as one of practicality and got moving. I put on warm clothes, grabbed a flashlight, gathered up the kittens in their box, and through the dark and wind, moved them to the woodpile behind the cement bunkhouse. I made a den of split logs and cuts of plywood, and inside piled up clean shop rags for warmth. When I freed the cats, they timidly looked about and read the air with their noses. They looked cold. I shined the light to the entrance, but they remained at my feet, clawing up my knee-high boots. One by one, I placed each inside the hovel and held the box against the entrance until they settled down. What would keep them here through the night? I thought and couldn't leave until I had an answer. I hurried back to the house and, from the dumpster, fished out the remnants of a roasted chicken from 2 nights before. The kittens alerted to the scent of flesh and picked and clawed at the sinewy rib cage in a frenzy. Then all really fell asleep hard in a soft pile. Inside my own bones, I felt I'd done a good thing, proud of my animal husbandry. I walked off home and went to bed. It wasn't until the next morning, checking the woodpile, that I realized my mistake. Bones and skin and fur everywhere, black and white and red. Guts. Skunks had come for the chicken and the kittens. Not one heartbeat out there but mine. So I'm hoping that you sense that as I'm working in these different formats, the stories and the pieces, they move differently, I hope. And I hope you understand too that they're not all true. They're designed to keep you reading more than anything. That was the thing I always tried to learn, to teach myself as a writer, is how to keep someone reading word to word, sentence to sentence, paragraph to paragraph, all the way to the end. Because as I know myself, I get off the boat quickly. That was the game I was trying to figure out. So you can see my early influences here. Got 20 more minutes. Going to read 2 more spots. Oh, I wanted to tell this little story too, about that story, Cleanup 1997. Without Georgia, that wouldn't be in this book. So I can't say that I'm doing this all on my own. I let Georgia read a first draft of the book, and she pointed to some soft parts of the book where she said, "You're a better writer than these pieces are showing you. Is there anything else you could slot in?" That Cleanup 1997 story sat on my computer, in my drawer, as they say, for 7 years unpublished. And I wouldn't have ever gone back to it had Georgia not pushed me to find a better representative work from 2015. But that's not to say I didn't think about that story for a long time. This is the story I want to tell you. I was at Stanford when I started writing that story. It was my very first year being a Stegner Fellow. And before that, I was working on the farm. And I came straight from the farm to California to start to meet with these other writers and work on a novel at the time, which is excerpted in this book. And I remember it was one of the first days of class with a new professor, and she asked us all, we went around the table, there were 10 of us in the room. She asked us all, what was the most exciting story that we were working on? And I, with anticipation, I had just cut out of our newspaper, the Post-Register, a story about horses getting abandoned out on people's farms because people couldn't feed their horses that year. Okay? And I just thought this was like the most home run story idea I had ever seen. And we go around the table at the Stegner workshop, and everyone's got these great complex story ideas. And I get to mine, and I was like, guys, I don't even want to tell anybody because I know you're going to want to steal this story idea. It might be the best story idea I've ever had. It's about a father and son who have to drive out to the desert and shoot a horse that has been left on their farm. So no one please steal it. I've told you, but don't steal it. And literally, crickets and blinks. Everyone was like, yeah, we don't want the dead horse story. That's all yours. In that same vein as you know, my examples of Philo and Vardis went out into the world to share their stories and to share the things that excited them, I got out in the world and realized that I needed bigger and more stories as well. I needed to add to my own home stories and make something new. My writing career took me from BYU, Idaho, which is the local university here, to University of Arizona, where I earned an MFA, studying both fiction and nonfiction, back home to the farm, to California to do the Stegner Fellowship, back home to the farm, and then out to Houston to do my PhD. And it was really as I moved to Houston and sunk deeply into postmodern literature and more craft principles of first-person writing that I think a different voice emerges, and that's what I'm going to read to you from next. This is an essay called Here Comes the Hot Stepper, which I wrote in relation to the song Here Comes the Hot Stepper for a music essay contest called March Xmas. I told you about our joint essay in that in 2020. This was the first time I wrote for March Xmas. In that, they give you a song, you're supposed to write an essay about it, it goes head to head with other songs and writers in a March Madness style tournament, and you get to rank up, okay? So the premise of this piece was, while I was getting my PhD, I was also driving Uber in Houston to make ends meet. And I'll read the opener of this. But really in that same vein, again, thinking about today as Pioneer Day, there had to be the impulse of our early pioneer people of adventure, of joining the unknown and trying to go out and be yourself in the unknown. And I feel like in part that's part of this essay, is me joining the world in a new way. So, and of course, like always, every piece that you'll find in the book is an experiment in a different vein. So maybe the language will feel a little different here. I'm going to start this essay though at 1 in the morning. The whole essay takes place over Super Bowl Sunday in Houston. The New England Patriots were playing the Atlanta Falcons, and I decided I was going to Uber the whole night and move people around the city. And anytime the right person got in my car, I would play Here Comes the Hot Stepper and ask them about what they thought about the song. Okay. So that's the premise. But as I found, the song was a minor part of what I was actually experiencing out in the car. So this is from the middle of Here Comes the Hot Stepper. Midnight, stuck in the middle of nowhere. I waited around for action. After a while, I got a request from a writer named Thor. I wanted adventures in babysitting, but instead got a boat mechanic with his young Tahana bride. Thor rejected the app's instructions and took me along Coward Creek to show me Hurricane Ike's floodline, but also to keep me from running into pigs. Actual pigs, not cops. There are wild pigs in Texas. I dropped Thor at 10 till 1 a.m. I was torn about what to do. The bars would close at 2 a.m. and then everyone would want to go home. And then it would be dead, and regardless of songs and conversation, I would still be mostly broke and down and out. Should I finish out in the suburbs or jet back to the city? I limped along in economy mode. Something pinged 8 miles closer to the Gulf. I accepted, turned my back to Houston, and whipped around. 4 young people stood out front of a Mexican cantina. 3 boys and 1 girl. She got in the front, and the 3 boys jumped into the back. None looked old enough to be drinking, though they acted loose and laughy. What was the big deal, I thought? It was Super Bowl weekend, an international holiday, a day when laws barely applied. The cantina had been a bust, and they were puddle jumping to the next bar, next town over. They asked about me, joked around. Their arrangements started to shake out. The loud dude, a minor league baseball player, had been dating the girl since high school back in Corpus. The other 2 dudes, the quiet lug, the pipsqueak, were his best friends and couldn't find dates. Not that they needed them. They were out to hang with each other. The pipsqueak had turned 21, and the friends were treating him right for a first night out. But that was not all. The pipsqueak had been in the hospital. His doctor had given him permission to come out. The hospital, I said, double taking him in the rear view. He was thin, down to his bones, with oversized elbows and protuberant wrists. His t-shirt fit him like a tablecloth, and he probably weighed all of 120 pounds. The boy scooted up, He was sitting middle back, an occupied space between passenger and driver's seat, and he talked, at first right in my ear. You want to hear a story? Here's a story. Last year, 12 months ago, I got diagnosed with cancer. Oh, I said. So I got diagnosed with cancer and they did chemo. Think of me, 12 weeks sitting in the chair, chemo in my arm. I feel worse, really. But they say that's normal to feel worse. So I take it, whatever. And after 12 weeks, the doctor regrets to inform me that they diagnosed me incorrectly. And they used the wrong chemo. And they have to start all over. Oh, I said. So you got that done, right? Yeah, another 3 months later, and nothing changed. The pipsqueak was loud and gripping, and his friends were laughing. They were roaring. They thought it was hilarious. Clearly, they'd heard this one before. They'd been hearing it all night long. I was horrified. So then what happened, I asked. Oh, the pipsqueak said, my parents mortgaged their house, and I moved into this big hospital in Houston. I said, so how's that going? He says, oh, they haven't done crap either. I mean, I'm still getting chemo. I'm on like my 5th round. All my hair fell out, and now new stuff is growing back. I feel like a human baby. They have no idea what to make of me over there. It was then that I could see they were all here for him. The friends. The pipsqueak was laughing, so his friends were laughing with him. Can you believe this? LOL. So I'm waiting for the turn in the story. Clearly he's in better shape now, right? If he's out drinking with friends? There's a happy ending to this story? Or was this the last hurrah? So what was it? I asked. I have to know. What do you have? He says, no one knows. That's what's so funny. His friends, ROFLOLOL. Then the kid said again, right in my ear, you don't believe me. You don't believe me, but my hair's soft. Touch it. Seriously. Feel it. It's pretty much exactly like a newborn's, I swear. The friends joined, cajoled, prodded, backing up their friend. Touch his head. Touch his head. I considered not doing it briefly, but maybe this is just me, or maybe it is where I was born, or who I was born to, and the techniques under which I was raised, or my own adult predilections. But I am not a person who likes to disappoint. I am philosophically opposed to the DARE program. I never just say no. My left hand on the wheel, eyes on the road, in total control. I reach back and I palm the guy's delicate head like a Nerf basketball. His hair felt like, what? A chinchilla? The perfect peach? The body? At its inception? At its conclusion? Did it feel like the soul? Pipsqueak's crew was right. His hair was and is the softest thing that these fingers have ever touched. I dropped them at some strip mall sports hole. The lug hung back to tip me $5, patted my shoulder, thanked me, wiped a tear. It was 1:40 in the morning. I parked to wait until the bar closed. where I could try and make it back to Sugar Land. But by then I was reckless, in a reckless, depressing mood, thinking about all the friends that I'd lost, who died or killed themselves since the 90s. And I put on an album that reminded me of all of them, and turned off Uber, and got on the Beltway. I pushed the Ford to 99 miles an hour, empty, deadheaded, lucky numbers 9, high school numbers, and I poured it on for my homies. I'm glad that just like this reading today, and just like any time an opportunity that comes to share art, it's scary and it's intimidating. I'm glad I had all of these opportunities, including this one today, to continue to be brave and to continue to try to be a writer and an artist in the world. As I read these things that I recorded, I'm glad that I wrote them down. That moment in the car was so ephemeral. It would have been long gone in my memory. But in trying to capture the essence of what was happening, hopefully, I captured humanity. There's a very good chance that that boy is not alive today. So I'm glad I wrote it. Now, it wouldn't be Pioneer Day. I'm on my last little section here to read. Wouldn't be Pioneer Day if I didn't talk about family, the family that's here, the family that's online, the family that's raised me. If we can look at this book and I could tell you some of the content, some of the topics. I write a lot about the farm and Idaho. I write a lot about my culture, Mormon culture, Western culture. I write a lot about work, a lot of job stories in this book, and I write a lot about family. And this last piece I'm going to read to you is from another online invitation where a whole bunch of writers affiliated with the website Essay Daily were invited to capture one day in an essay. And we were all given, I've done this twice. I wrote a summer solstice essay that is in the book when Georgia and I are still in Houston. But the winter solstice essay, 12/21/19, happened to be the first winter we were back in Idaho. And so this essay is just a day out of the life of the two of us. And per that experiment, this is a letter written to Georgia. So it's written in first person, but I will refer to a you. And when I refer to a you, that's Georgia. Okay. The content of this essay is this. We were supposed to go down to my sister Mallory's house on the 21st of December 2019. And we were supposed to be there by 10 a.m., but we didn't even wake up until 9 a.m., so there was no way we were going to make it down there. The first half of the essay lays out our family dynamic in this place that we live in. We had cleaned up a wedding the day before. And then we get on the long road down to Utah, which many of you, I'm sure, will know intimately. For us, it was a new drive with this family for me. And then after I get done reading this, thank you for holding your incredible applause. Once I get done with this story, if you want to clap or snap, in that poet reading, feel free. And then if you have some questions, I'll take questions for 5 or 10 minutes, nothing big. But we're almost done. So this is just after we get back on the highway from Brigham City and we enter Utah. Then it was back on the road through the brutal grays and flames of industrial urban rock-faced Utah. The Air Force Base, the gravel pits, the refineries, the mines. Nothing like the fertile rose of my Idaho heritage. This terrain has always stayed general displeasing to me. This was our promised land, my Zion, our salt. I always had my doubts, which made for most of my problems. I wondered what you, Georgia, made of the site, your southern poet sensibilities applied to this dry, windy, alkaline experiment. And I asked you what you thought, and your eyes got wet and distant, and all you could talk about was beauty. Beauty, a setting to make belief in God imaginable. Oh, the poems you could make. Made me tear up too, this deep and abiding pleasure to show my world to you, your eyes and heart seasoned, your poetry sound. We finally got off the highway and followed the map directions to my sister's new house, down the second cul-de-sac, not the first, which featured a front yard with a brass sculpture of 3 life-sized brass kids on a slide, no other shrubbery, very spooky. There was no snow down there, but the wind was brisk. This is December. We pulled into my sister's driveway just after 4 in the afternoon, 8 hours late, but just like we'd always planned to do, according to our third best plan. Their driveway faced east, and we arrived in the house's shadow. It already felt like the day was done, and we'd missed everything. There's a whole bunch of people in the house. The party's just getting started. As I announced packing in bags and pillows through the front door, there were Mallory's sons, all younger than 7, all in matching but different combat pajamas, and Trevor, her husband, in shorts. They made a nice and effective family. The oldest son insisted we all take our shoes off. This was the 3rd home they'd bought since they'd been married, fiduciary wizards. Proudly, Mallory gave us the tour of it all, and I was impressed with the corner lot backyard, the varied fruit trees all producing. We went upstairs and downstairs, saw the boys' rooms and laundry and basement office gym, and we all ended up back in the living room, wherein also were Katie and DeAndre and little DeAndre, in from New York City with the holidays, and staying with us, riding back in the Jeep once we had the kids to the airport and on their plane tomorrow. Firex, Trevor, DeAndre, and the oldest boy all took up the living room couch and had switch paddles ready to destroy each other in Smash Bros. We watched for a while and talked with Mallory as she started to make supper, chicken cordon bleu, and with Katie about her new therapeutic work. Little DeAndre had the saddest, most pathetic, and adorable croup. He kept sneezing and wheezing and sighing those big boy sighs. You kept saying, just looking at him gave you baby fever. That's Georgia. He too wore combat pajamas, but these with footies, just a tiny tyke. At some point, you went downstairs with Azrael to situate your things. I'm pretty sure you both fell on your butts down the stairs. Katie, her purpose still unclear to me in many ways, wanted me to collaborate on a rewrite of the popular hip-hop hit Shoot by Salt and Peppa. Except she wanted to parodize it into a song about little DeAndre's croup. I told her I couldn't help her, but that I championed her nonetheless. She started to pencil out the ditty. Then quickly, she darted off with little DeAndre in front of the gaming TV. I read Katie's lyrics, written down. Croup, croup a loop, croup a loop, croup a loop, a loop, a loop. "Oh my goodness, girl, look at him. He's the sickest baby in here, and he's coughing our way." Outside it was night dark, but the stove clock said 5:10. The chicken finished and the potatoes got whipped, and we all squeezed in at the table. I'm gonna jump ahead here. We eat dinner, and then Mallory has made a cake. Okay. Back upstairs, we went to the kitchen again. Mallory produced the celebratory dessert, a 20-inch high s'more cake with graham cracker crust and crumbles and marshmallow cream and homemade chocolate icing. It was all homemade by my sister, who loves to make cakes for people she loves, for your daughter, Georgia, who loves to eat marshmallows. Who would have thought we could have all this cake and make room for more? Remember Mallory's second son, the one who reminded me a lot of me, speech impediment and all? How we decided to volunteer to be Azrael's servant for her birthday, and was spinning her around in the office chair, and then running to the far end of the kitchen, only to spring back and power slide her on his knees. Utter rock star devotion, and not bad gyrations, but so bound for heartbreak, that kid. About then, my parents, who are here tonight, missionaries far, far away in the Pacific Island micronation of Kiribati, called me on Facebook Messenger. They had not been anywhere but the island since June, in charge of the Mormon mission force there, and they were a day ahead of us, their moment in 1222, that much closer to the first long set of holidays that we were not spending together. And wow, this technology, keeping families alive and together through the toughest international time zones. It was too loud to talk and too tough a connection to have a conversation. So I turned the camera outward and showed them the family parties, the group dancing, the wild goofy hair shakes, the power slides, and they just grinned and grinned on the video chat, mostly because they were glitchy and freezing, as the reality of that connection goes. It was an act of faith, this relationship with them and us, and nice to sort of have them there, at least in pixel and spirit. Georgia and I go downstairs then, and we're about to go to bed. Azrael was asleep on the oversized beanbag chair, and you were on a recliner space in the big wraparound leather couch, sitting straight up, knitting under the overhead lamp. You couldn't sleep, upset in the stomach and heart from your daughter's growing up and your children's departure, your change of station and situation, and the loss of your gallbladder. It was freezing in the basement, Mallory and Trevor not interested in spiking their power bill. So frigid, I said I thought I could see my own breath, but it was too dark to know. After midnight, when I plugged in my phone to the entertainment center power strip and set an alarm for 4 a.m., then 4:04, then 4:05, we couldn't miss getting the kids on their flights, though we hated the thought of it. We had no time for mistakes tomorrow, which was today, and we couldn't afford to make like yesterday, which was over. We had to be on time, this time for once, whether we liked it or not. You, Georgia, were insomniatic under the lamplight with your needles working. She's a knitter. Alert in your yarn care, clinking violently along. And I figured you weren't going to get much sleep, but we'd be all right. I knew the way to the airport and needed to rest my eyes like 2 hours max. I knew you were sad to see them go and needed my heat. I put on my coat and got 2 quilts and laid myself down on top of you and the blankets on top of us. And I put my head on your lap and you knitted and tinked in my ear. I held you by the hips and started to fade, thinking if what we had just lived through was really truly the shortest, coldest day, maybe also It was one of our warmest, brightest, longest, best. So, buy 1 million copies of the book. There are more cat stories. There are also cow stories, horse stories. There are lots of fathers and son stories. Again, I just feel privileged that I've got to be a writer for as long as I have. And putting this book out in the world hopefully continues to allow me to be a writer in this world. If there are any questions, we have a few minutes. If there are not, that's okay too. I'll take any questions from y'all that are here with me to start, and then maybe we can look online if somebody has a question. So, if you'll call one out, if you have one, I'll repeat it and try to answer it. Oh, hi, Mom.
Oh, hi. When will the book of sons and mothers be ready
Oh,
to be produced?
great question. So my mom asked, when will there be a book of sons and mothers? And I believe D.H. Lawrence wrote a book called Sons and Mothers. But I love that book. I would say mothers certainly factor into the next 2 books. I have one more book slated for next year. It deals with my cousin, Nate Bozong, snowboarder and lifestyle icon, who is my cousin through his mother and my mother. They're sisters. I think we'll find a lot of stories about mothers and sons in that book. Certainly underrepresented in literature, and I'm happy to try to write a really good mother and son book. And I am a mama's boy too, so works out nicely. And then our book after that, the next book that we will write, Georgia and I will write a book called Other People's Parties, which is going to be about us working in the wedding industry and running a wedding venue where we're broadcasting from today, which is, most of our life. 6 days out of the week, we are doing this work. So I think we'll see a lot more mother-family stories in that book as well. Great question. Do we have a question from this side of the room? Great. Georgia, do we have any questions online? Oh, we got one question back here.
What would be your favorite story that you've ever written?
Ooh.
Short story.
My favorite short story, I think there's a really good one called Inside Out in the book. That's a calving day gone wrong. That feels very, very Idahoan to me. But like everything, the newest thing is the thing I'm proudest about and most excited about, even if it's not the best. That's why everybody needs a good editor, and that's why I've got Georgia over my shoulder, so she can be like, yeah, your Triceratops story is not going anywhere. Let's rein it in, bring it back to something that people can get behind.
Hey, Judge.
Yeah.
Said a lot of people, when you write about Idaho, it almost seems like almost a prehistoric, like, I guess people have never seen it.
Yeah.
The more you write about it, the older you get, are you more appreciative of the Idaho lifestyle?
Absolutely. So I think one big blessing to going out and getting the degrees, particularly this last one in Houston, was I was gone longer from Idaho than I've ever been gone, 4.5 years, right? And I stayed down there for most of the summers to work, and I was totally disconnected from place other than, farm updates and hearing what my parents were up to and all that. My early work I took for granted because all of those stories were just mine inherited, right? I just was born here and had eyes and ears, and I just kept track of everything and wrote it down. Now coming back with fresh eyes and better skills, I feel like I can write a truer book about Idaho, an even more comprehensive book, so it doesn't feel like it's back there in the Stone Age. It's not. This is another place in time and space, just as important as any other. That would be, the Nate book takes place here in Idaho in 2021. I'm hoping that I can use all of my gained skills to really paint the full picture of Idaho finally. I don't think it's complete in this book. That would be the endeavor of a lifetime, though, for sure. So, great question. Okay, I think we're going to call it. Thank you all for coming. We're going to shut down the live streams, We're all going to go, I don't know, think about our pioneer heritage, dig a hole, plant a tree. Yes. Thanks for coming, everybody.